Good morning to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. We're pleased to have everyone here, and I'm Anton Thayalan, the Chief Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions, and I will be the voice of the webinar this morning. Welcoming everyone to a new and improved Season 3 of Reset and Go, in continuation of Saturdays of Learning with Luminary. We present Revive and Thrive. As the saying goes, gear up and get your learning on. So in today's segment of Revive and Thrive, we're discussing a unique topic, loyalty, a thing of the past, a controversial exchange of real experiences, validated ideas, and on which to leverage your success and truly thrive. Our subject matter experts, whom we are truly honored to have on the panel this morning. It is my pleasure to welcome Tony Nadaraja, a celebrated former CEO of Hidramani Woven Cluster. Tony prides himself with a doctorate awarded by the University of Life. Tony started working at the age of 18 and started out on his career path as a casual employee and rose through the ranks to the ultimate title of CEO. An avid wildlife enthusiast and a wildlife photographer who spends majority of his retirement in the wilderness. Joining him as the guest is Viran Pereira, Managing Director of Kuragaha Lodge and former Associate Vice President and Country Manager for Mast Industries. From a trainee merchandiser to an AVP and Country Manager, Viran has nearly 20 years of expertise in the apparel industry. He retired early and decided to invest his resources in a boutique hotel close to Yala Wildlife Park. He enjoys the simple things in life and has recently found a passion for golfing. His favorite pastime now is spending time with family, with golf being a second close. And joining us also on the panel is none other than Dinesh Vikramanayaka, the Managing Director of WNS Sri Lanka. Dinesh is a senior leader with a proven track record in a number of financial and management disciplines and a wealth of expertise and knowledge gained over 30 years of experience in the areas of finance, accounting, setting up and managing global business services, captive shared service centers, and all aspects of business process management and re-engineering. He is currently on the advisory board for Export Development Board for IT and BPM. This body is responsible for executing government policies in relation to IT BPM in Sri Lanka, and it is a gazette appointment by the Sri Lankan government. Gentlemen, a very good morning, and let's dive right in, shall we?
Good morning.
So, loyalty, a thing of the past. In the face of the ever-evolving nature of corporate culture and businesses as a whole, we have now witnessed how everything has been revalued. For a fact, now that we work in a multi-generational workforce, naturally, how everyone values and views loyalty differs. Now, some view loyalty as blind, unquestioning fealty and gratitude, while others view loyalty with a demand in transparency, authenticity, and engagement to merit in return. I guess my question to you gentlemen, and I guess I will start with Dinesh, if that's all right. How do you define loyalty? What does it mean to you personally, or what does loyalty translate to you, sir?
Yeah, no, thanks very much. So first, before I get started, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Luminary for inviting me. It's fantastic to be on this fabulous panel. So I think loyalty for me means, and I guess, if you look at it from a definition standpoint, as you said before, Anton, it could mean, faithfulness, trustworthiness, devotion, and reliability. But I think for me, loyalty works two ways. it definitely is not a thing of the past. I think contextually it's changed the way we view loyalty, because effectively the workforce that we manage today has evolved from what it was 20, 30 years ago. 25 years ago, I still have friends who joined the one organization, stayed with it till they retired, 35 years, and that I don't think is necessarily going to happen. So for me, loyalty is a two-way street. It works both ways. I cannot demand loyalty. I need to work extremely hard at ensuring that we create a bond that that is conducive to making that relationship a loyal one. And what I mean by that loyalty is not necessarily that blindly following someone or doing something for the sake of it, but it's because there are vested interests that have been understood, appreciated, and worked on by both parties, so that you collectively come together, you understand each other's needs, you create the right environment for each party. So if you take it from an organization perspective and an individual's perspective, you effectively align the career growth of the individual with that of the organization, so that you create that environment for them to move forward. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that's I think today's leaders need to work extremely hard at it. Some say you can't say trust me, I know it. You've got to earn it, and I think loyalty is very much on the same same lines. Is something that we as leaders need to ensure that we earn it and work hard to ensuring that it stays that way.
Right. On that, I know you mentioned some interesting perspectives to that, and we will come right back to that. Tony, sir, can I ask you for your definition? What does that mean to you, loyalty, personally?
Loyalty to me means something that, like everything else in life, has to be earned. And the emphasis is on the employer. You have to be first loyal to your employee to expect him or her to be loyal to you. As soon as there is a financial issue or a downturn in business, if you go looking at rupees and cents and sacrifice your people, call it what you may, right size, down size, cost cutting, you ain't getting no loyalty in return. But you can be as tough as you want. You can argue the toss, you can be demanding to your people, but if they know deep down, when push comes to shove, this company will stand with me, your people will be loyal to you.
So that is on a corporate perspective,
Yes.
Yes. Viran, hi. Sorry.
Hi. Hi.
Just a quick run. What is loyalty to you, sir? And we've heard Dinesh's perspective. We've definitely heard Tony's perspective. What is loyalty to you as an individual? And you've been in the corporate world and you've now moved into running your own business, your own resort. Yep. How does loyalty translate to you?
So first of all, as I would like to thank you for inviting me on this panel, and it's an honor to be here. My perspective on loyalty is very, very simple. Loyalty to me personally means that you stand by someone even when things are tough. And as you mentioned, and as the other panelists mentioned before, it is definitely a two-way street. For you to expect somebody to stand by you when things are tough, you need to show that quality to others first, and then others follow. So to me, very simply, it's standing by somebody. It could be viewed from an organizational perspective. It could be viewed from a relationship perspective. It could be viewed from a personal perspective. But very simply, whatever perspective, whatever lens you put, it's very simply is to stand by somebody.
Okay, thank you for that. Interesting that we've got three different views to it. So I'm going back to something that I heard a couple of days back while watching a movie. So Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, many of you would have heard, the charge of the Light Brigade, which commemorates the courage of 600 British soldiers charging a heavily defended position during the Battle of Balaclava in Crimea and sacrificing themselves without ever calling their orders into question. And I quote the famous saying, "Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die." Now, while I understand the military and the armed forces demand unquestioning loyalty, but these lines have kind of raised the question, is there a limit to loyalty? Should somebody draw the line in terms of loyalty? And can I open the floor with Viran, please?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think there's when you really dissect loyalty and what it means, there's different ways in which you can obtain loyalty. Some of the ways that you can obtain loyalty is, I would say it's short term as opposed to long term loyalty. There are certain, when you build trust, when you have trust with somebody, when you know that that person means well for you, when you know that there is your interest or the interest of greater good that is that you're thinking of, then in a relationship like that you start building long-term trust and long-term loyalty, as opposed to where you can even buy loyalty. You know, you can pay somebody very well, you can look after their interest in the short term, and then you build it. It's not long-term loyalty, it's not real loyalty, but for a short period of time you buy that person's loyalty. So I view it I view it a little differently. There is different ways in which you build it, but to be honest, once you've really established the fact that you've built that trust, that this person means well in the long term, even if I have to forego certain of my interest in the short term, then you've built loyalty for a period of time, for in the long term.
Tony, sir?
Yes. Loyalty, yes, I also, to come back to your charge of the Light Brigade, there is also a view attributed to General George S. Patton, behind the language, but this is actually what he said, they say. No son of a bitch ever won a war by dying for his country. He won a war by making the other dumb son of a bitch die for his country. So I don't need no heroes. I want my men to come out the other side and have the best option. Loyalty, I think, like Viren said, it is different definitions, but I feel the best way to build loyalty within a team or within the people is for them to have their say. Always, every decision. Well, somebody, whoever is on the top will make the final call, but everyone feels that they are contributing, their ideas are valued, their input is valued. Maybe it's not taken and worked upon, but it's still accepted for what it is. Then it means more than an increment or a salary. It means that I am part of this. When I get up in the morning and come to work, they are not expecting my brain to be left in the guard room. They want it inside there, and they're asking me how you can contribute. And so I'm happy. I'm like in a family. So that, I think, is what generally builds loyalty. And I think in today's world, a lot of companies are missing that because they are employing people or numbers and not persons who who are committed to, maybe they don't hold the same view as their boss, but they have a view for the organization. Maybe totally different view, but it is their view and it is their organization also. So I think you need to encourage people to contribute like that, and that will build loyalty.
Sure. Dinesh, any thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with both of what Viran and Tony had to say. I think it's all about hearts and minds, and I think, you know, that engagement and empowerment, and when I spoke about that whole two-way street, takes a lot of hard work to get there, right? Because I think first and foremost, you know, Sri Lankans, from a cultural standpoint, you know, tends to be a little pessimistic sometimes, you know, not as trustworthy. So you really need to work at it. And I think, you know, it cannot just come from my level. It needs to be inculcated within the ranks, you know, if your immediate leadership team and beyond. And that's how you got to work through that, you know. So for me, you know, winning their hearts and minds, and I think this applies even in a military sense, because, you know, when you go into battle, you know, you need to have the backing of each other to ensure that, you know, you get taken care of. And similarly, you know, I think Tony alluded to this earlier, you know, when financial troubles and difficulties we face in our organization, when people get thrown under the bus sometimes by different people, you as leaders need to ensure that you're there to pick them up and guide them and get them back on track, right? So, you know, I think for me, it's about engagement. But personally, what I want to do is I like to meet with every individual that joins our organization. I have a team of about 800 people here in Sri Lanka, and we're growing. We expect, you know, to crack the 1,000 very soon for the first time after 15 years. But every single individual, I want to introduce myself, spend some time with them, and set expectations, make sure that we have our undertakings put in place and our commitment given to them, so that for me, it's the start of their journey. Through their journey, I connect with at least 40 to 80 people a month, you know, not one-on-one, but in a group session, but just so that we get to hear and understand. And then when they leave, I meet with them as well, right? So for me, that's a 360-degree view, but also it puts me, you know, where my, you know, money where my mouth is, right? Because I can't say one thing at the beginning, do something in the middle, and then cop something at the back end, because people will let you know it. So I think for me, it's exactly that. You need to work with people. They need to trust you, know that you know what you're doing, but also that you got their back as well.
Brilliant. I mean, agreed. Again, different thoughts and perspectives. And as we dive deep in, my question, I suppose, would be, can we blindly break the law or bend the rules in the name of loyalty? Allow a white lie, maybe, an omission of information by the manager, or because of a loyalty to a manager, in terms of sharing information to the organization or higher up? Is that because then you're loyal to your manager, but you're omitting the information that should, omission of an information that should ideally go up, doesn't get done? How does that fit into loyalty?
Well, Anton, if I take that, I think loyalty should be encouraged to the organization, not to the manager or to you. Loyalty should be something that is focused and encouraged to the organization. Being loyal to you, well, it's nice because that guy will do whatever you say, or you know, you look after each other, but that is not loyalty in organization sense that we want. We want people who are fiercely loyal to the organization. Therefore, if he feels that you are stepping out of line, you as his boss or the immediate person, ideally, he should have the confidence and it should have been built up so that he can talk to his boss straight away and say, look here, brother, what you're doing, I don't agree with. So, can we look at this some other way? And if he still feels that it's not being done the best interest of the organization, I think he should have a way of bringing it up. So the organization should have some method where that can be addressed. Because personal loyalty is one thing. It's very nice, they say. I mean, people don't leave organizations, they leave their bosses, they say, and things like that. But still, I don't think we should encourage a culture of a white lie or looking the other way when you know in your conscience that that is out of line. Because if that is so, other people will see. And then that becomes the culture of the organization after some time. So I think you should encourage people to be forthright and open and be able to take it. Because
be able to take it, I suppose, is the key.
Yeah, correct.
I think, Anton, I think to answer your question, should you, withhold information, should you do a white lie? The answer is an absolute resounding no, right? Because for me, there are certain ethics, certain disciplines, certain practices that you need to be extremely clear and, provide clarity about, right? So there are certain things that are absolute zero tolerance for you, and I think that needs to be understood by people. And one thing is, that type of issue needs to be managed extremely carefully. And it's not about you being disloyal to someone. It's, as Tony said, it's about that loyalty that you show to your organization and doing the right thing, right? Doing the right thing, in my view, does not in any way replace nor substitute for loyalty, right? Having the ethics and consistency in making sure that you follow that process is extremely important, because for me, it's also about precedence. You do it once, at what point do you stop it? And for who do you stop it, right? Favoritism is an absolute pet hate of mine. I don't believe in favoritism. I think you need to ensure that you provide the right opportunities for people based on their merit. And therefore, doing anything that is undue or, that's not, let's say, I guess, officially okay, it is an absolute no for me.
Right. Viran, just if your thoughts are aligned to what Dinesh and Tony just said, I want to quickly throw in something on what Dinesh just said. I mean, sure. And I'm diving into a bit of a controversial water, so to speak. The hot topic in the news these days is the Trump administration. Now, I know they value loyalty above all else. Now, Trump is a leader chosen by the people. Good or bad is a different conversation. But he openly proclaimed to the former FBI director that he needed loyalty. And evidently, those who are loyal receive pardons, those who praise him receive favors. And this is seen as a practice in one of the highest offices in the world. And everyone else seems to be powerless to prevent it. And as Dinesh, you just brought out rightly, and we see this power play in politics and in organizations. But what this translates to is that unquestioning loyalty is actually the death of ethics. Dinesh, sorry, to Viran, let me throw this question. Is on that note, do we question loyalty? Do we implement check and balance, or do we take as loyalty is conditional?
So here's the way I see this. At the end of the day, we assume that loyalty per se is a good thing, but there are certain situations, certain circumstances where loyalty may not be a good thing. But be it the most powerful country on earth, be it an organization, be it a small team, how you manage it, how you expect loyalty from your subordinates or your team or your fellow countrymen sets a certain culture as to how things work in that team or that group of people. Now I don't think there is one right answer to this. However, in the way you conduct yourself, in the way you set the culture, 10 years down the line, or 5 years down the line, or 3 years down the line, at different time horizons, you'll have hindsight and you'll think back and say, wow, this was a great thing to do, this was a good thing to do, good things have come out of this. Or history will judge you as a complete villain. So I think what actually happens is that over a period of time, this blind loyalty or this short-term loyalty or setting of a bad culture within this team will get judged and you will get caught out.
Dinesh, Tony, any thoughts on that?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Tony.
I agree with Viren. I think blind loyalty could well be an issue. But again, I think we have two things to think about. I think the voters' loyalty should be to your country, not to your president. Number one. Number two, I think for whatever ethics or loyalty, there's an underlying basic human decency kind of thinking that it has to be based upon. I mean, the base should be basic human decency must be there. Then as to what you do, it's a different issue, but I think all this is based on being a decent human being and doing the decent thing.
Right. Thank you. Dinesh, before I come to you on that, for those of you who've just joined in, we are in conversation with Tony Nadaraja, former CEO of Hidramani Woven Cluster, Viran Pereira, Managing Director of Koragaha Lodge and former Associate Vice President and Country Manager for Mast Industries, and Dinesh Vikramanayaka, Managing Director, WNS Sri Lanka. Thank you for joining us. So we're back, and Dinesh, you were just about to add to that. Can I throw in a little twist to that? And I know you come from a military background. I know your father was in the military for many years, and if I'm not mistaken, you spent about 3 to 4 years in the military as well, Dinesh. Colin Powell, and I know we looked at loyalty earlier on, and we did use military, but Colin Powell made a statement, and he said, when we are debating an issue, loyalty means giving me your honest opinion, whether you think I like it or not. But once a decision has been made, the debate ends. My question to you, sir, is how about the military and loyalty in the military? Why is this any different? Is it loyalty or is it discipline?
Yeah, look, I think that's a fantastic question and a tough one to answer. And as you said, I think for me, I think there are subtle differences, I think, if I may put it that way. But they are quite significant because what happens is, as you mentioned earlier, I had spent about 4 or 5 years in the armed forces before I left and joined the private sector. And what I found was that, certain things were hardwired into me, right? These were softer skills. However, because of my training, because of the I guess the environment that we had, been trained in, some of that stuff, so it, in the army, it was basically the leader's job to ensure that they take the right decisions, think through, not necessarily get feedback, not necessarily, you can always ask for it, but you don't have to. But you're supposed to make the call, go with it, right? And when I switched over, right, into the private sector, and as I sort of went through my career, I used to get a lot of feedback through surveys and things like that, where they felt that some of that was actually not what they were wanting. Right? So people were saying, this guy's quite autocratic. He will do what he thinks he needs to do, and not necessarily incorporate or sort of include the rest of the team in their conversation. And over those sort of 30 years, I've sort of certainly moved across. The needles moved, to the other side of the spectrum, where I absolutely believe now with what Colin Powell had actually said, and I live by it, right? I think decisions need to be made in consultation, but as Tony said earlier, at the end of the day, you are still required to make a decision, and you make that decision. But once you make that decision, everybody's in it, and you've got to drive it, and there's no point talking about it. So I think for me, it's that whole journey in that spectrum from being at one end, where I felt that as the leader, my whole existence was to take care of everything, think through on everything, make the call, not necessarily include people, to sort of, moving across to the different other side of the spectrum, where I, absolutely value people's opinions. But I also say to people that, we're not running a democracy, right? So I think when you are running an organization, you want to get people's views, and you value people's views. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to make a decision, and that needs to be understood by all.
Okay, that's from a military perspective being brought into the corporate world. But with the infusion of the BPO culture, especially here in Sri Lanka, and we get to see this, workplaces are becoming now more transactional. There are SLAs, there are KPIs, there are awards that go against each tier of achievement. So the thought process, gentlemen, is I do X amount of work, you pay me for the work that I do, and the time that I spend, and the effort that I put in. Everyone is being paid to do what is expected of them. Now, when you are on that mindset, on that kind of a setting, can we really demand or expect loyalty for a transactional exchange? And is loyalty really a two-way street, as we heard earlier on, mentioned by both Tony as well as Dinesh?
So Anton, I think let me have a crack at this, right? Because I think from a BT standpoint, you're absolutely right. I think I wouldn't necessarily say it's transactional. I think what it is that there are defined roles for individuals with specific outcomes for each of those individuals, aligned with those, I guess, the expectations that we have set with our clients in terms of delivering a service or a product to them. So for me, and what we have done here at WNS, we have a fantastic culture. And that culture is based on loyalty, but it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street through engagement, empowerment, right? Empowerment is a very interesting word, right? Empowerment means to me creating the right environment, the right opportunities, positioning people, as I said earlier, understanding individuals' careers, positioning and creating those opportunities for them, so that, as the company grows, how they can also grow, and obviously ensuring that you set them up for success. So I don't necessarily agree that it is transactional. Yes, definitely from a delivery outcome perspective, there are set KPIs, which in my view is a lot better than people not knowing exactly whether they have done their job or haven't done their job, right? Now, that coupled with a very strong sort of performance feedback mechanism, not necessarily at the end of the year or at the middle of the year, on an ongoing basis, right? Every single day you provide feedback, every month you have feedback, etc., helps create a better individual who can reach the potential that they have. And you actually, guide those people through that career. So I think for me, it's the culture that we have built in. You know, we have a fantastic culture that is very much centered around togetherness and as one team.
Thank you. Viran, on that note, can I ask, I mean, you've gone from the corporate world to being an entrepreneur. Clearly, you've got two different sets of resources supporting your vision, your drive. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I quite agree with Dinesh when he said that the BPO industry is although on the surface it may seem as if it's very transactional in nature, it is not so. However, on a larger scale, what I see is that people look at their job in far more of a transactional mindset than they used to. And I think one of the reasons, and there are many reasons for this, one of the reasons is that there is I think a void in the leadership of organizations, whether it's a large organization or a small team or a small entrepreneurial venture. There is a huge void in the leadership being able to communicate effectively a vision or why the organization exists. And due to that void, people tend to see their day-to-day functions or this day-to-day job that they do as a means of purely earning a living, as opposed to being engaged in a venture, engaged in something larger than themselves. Human beings by nature, I think, are inspired when they know that they are engaged or they're involved in something much bigger than themselves. So I think that's a huge role of leadership, to really communicate with their teams, with their workforce, to say that, look, you know what, there is a much bigger agenda here, not just doing your task or not just doing the list of functions that you need to complete for the day. But by doing that, how does that translate to achieving this greater vision that we're talking about? Achieving the objectives of the organization, which in turn would help the individual or the workers in that organization achieve their individual or personal goals as well, be it financial, be it career progression, be it whatever else.
Sure. Again, it was a question that had come up earlier on, and I kind of added on to that. And thank you, Dinesh, for clarifying that. You're right. It is the KPIs are there to guide. The roles are not transactional, and I've agreed Viran's point of view, which is unfortunately the mindset that we have in today's working environment is that it is transactional. But before I come into Tony, an interesting point that Viran mentioned, that the failure is in bridging the gap between what it is in reality versus how people perceive it, is the failure to communicate that from the leadership down. But before I throw this question at Tony, and I have just to add a little bit more, the precondition of any employment is that most of us are employed at will, and that employment could be ended by either party for any reason at any time. There is no guarantee that I will remain in this position no matter how well I am paid or have a growth career plan, etc. There is no guarantee that I will remain in this position, or that this position in itself will remain available for me, although I was promised it. Things could change. Now, a classic case is we've just come out of COVID, and companies were free to wield pay cuts, retrenchments, in the name of cutting costs or for greater good. And I remember, Tony, you opened your statement with that. What is the organization's part in being loyal to the employee? Or has loyalty become redundant in that sense?
Well, I don't think loyalty has become redundant. There are plenty of stories out there that where the leaders have been able to build the culture of loyalty, like Herb Kelleher at Southwest Airlines. For 28 years, running a national, not an international airline, just a local domestic airline. Year on year, he made profits through the financial crisis, through the fuel crisis, through everything. His pilots used to get on the plane and service it. His flight crew used to go and do the bags. And for 28 years, he outperformed all the other airlines in the US. And when he was asked by one of the business journalists, Mr. Kelleher, what's your strategic plan? He said, oh, I have one of those. It's called doing things. I mean, you do what is necessary to be done. You get your people involved. And Tom Peters, writing in Search of Excellence, says he was shocked when he was walking down the corridor with this guy. Somebody comes up and says, I mean, so many $1 million for it. He said, look at it, and he said, okay, go ahead, do it. Now he says he can't think of any other organization in the world where he is walking down the corridor and somebody bring a $5 million thing to sign, and he signs it off and he carries on. So I think getting people involved, even this, our Malaysian guy, Tony Fernandez and his, what do you call it, Asia. Something like that. I mean, he started from nothing, the people do everything. The baggage attendant will get on the plane and serve. You know, there are organizations like that. And people do that, though they are paid less than others and than other big airlines, but people work for them. They are loyal to the company. So I think that kind of culture can be built. Like Viren said, there's a void from the top to the general workforce. Like, I think Sri Lankan workforce is good. Our problem is our management. Because all our managers try to manage. Nobody wants to lead. Nobody wants to make sure what the other guy is doing and whose authority he is doing it on. Nobody wants to say, okay, boys, do it. I'll look after your backs. That is what's lacking in our country, I think. And that is what does not build loyalty. People will stick their neck out if they believe that somebody is watching their back. As long as their intention is honorable, I think it is the duty of the company or the leadership to ensure that they have an environment to try the best.
Thank you for that.
Sorry,
go ahead, sir.
If I may just add something there, I think we spoke of post-COVID, and there were many organizations that went through large retrenchment or VRS schemes or whatever you may call it. I'm talking about normal situations, not post-COVID, but pre-COVID. I think loyalty and even leadership, the role of leadership is really to understand if you're really loyal. I go back to my initial statement where I said loyalty is the quality or the ability to stand by somebody. And what that really means is that you have their best interests at heart. And it could be that you have somebody on your team or your organization, although that person has certain skills, may not fit into your organization and what you want to achieve. But their skills may be suited somewhere else in a different organization or a different team. Now, being loyal really means that you sit down with that person and have that honest heart-to-heart conversation to say, you know what, this is what you're good at. And here's a place where I think your skills can be utilized so that you achieve a certain sense of fulfillment and career progression that you're looking for. And to be able, the honesty to be able to have that conversation. In a situation like that, that's not retrenchment. That's really being loyal to that individual. And there are many instances, there are many examples where even though there have been transitions like that, that person remains loyal to that boss or that leader or that person who had that honest conversation. So in the short term, that it might look like something bad is happening. In the long term, that person themselves realize that it's not something bad, it's something good came out of this. So just wanted to throw that in.
No, thank you very much for that. Dinesh, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I absolutely agree. I think for me, I think there's a couple of things. You know, we have respect at work, right? That's something that we take very seriously here at WNS, and people say, you know, so what does respect mean to you? And my answer always is, you know, respect means to me being honest with everyone, right? With individuals, and to the points that were made earlier. I think it's extremely important for us to be honest, but also I think it's also important to appreciate that culturally where your organization sits in that spectrum, right? Because, you know, it's one thing for you to be say, you know, I'm going to be absolutely honest, this is how it's going to be done, it's going to be an open and transparent culture, but people may not be necessarily ready for it, and your managers and your leaders may not necessarily be ready for it. And I think as leaders, and certainly from my perspective, one of the things that I understood and identified is that gap. And in order to bridge that gap, a significant amount of investment had to be put in for retraining and re-educating some of our leaders, right? So some bad habits, you can wean them away from there. Some of it are hardwired, and to Viran's point, that's when we need to have those hard conversations to basically say, you know, here's where you're at, here's what you can do, and here's what we're going to tweak to ensure that you get there. But these things you definitely can't do, and therefore you need to try and find a happy medium for it. So I think that significant investment in leadership training. It's not about domain training, right? I have this joke that I share with my team always, that, you know, everybody's very good at strategy, no one's very good at execution, because everyone wants to talk, not necessarily walk. And I think it's extremely important for us to follow that through. And for me, it's about me ensuring that I invest in these people, provide the leadership for them, and that leadership training that we do cannot be a one-off that you do and you forget about, but it's an ongoing thing where it needs to be every month, right? So we've just conducted about 8 months ago, early this year, a leadership program called Authentic Leader for all of our senior leaders. Every senior leader in this organization, about 25 people, went through that training session. And I still, to this date, every 2-3 months, I spend with them sitting down and saying, you know, how are we going with this particular piece of the leadership that you've been working on? And I think that is consistency. It's the investment, it's the identification, and working together to change that culture. That is extremely important. And I think through that, you know, the whole loyalty comes in, you know, obviously through the whole COVID situation, organizations, particularly such as WNS, you know, we have a significant investment or focus in the travel and hotel industry, and we took a bit of a hit. However, we're doing a lot better than a lot of our competitors, and our market share has reflected that accordingly. However, we in Sri Lanka, I'm very proud of this, that we never laid a single individual off. We managed to retain all of our individuals. In fact, we managed to grow our business because of the resilience that we showed, because of the trust that we had built in our global network, where business is still coming to Sri Lanka, right? So that's something that we've done, and I think, you know, as I said, it's something that you got to keep on working, and it's never enough. You know, it's something that you cannot stop.
You need to put in continuous effort, is your point, and I take that. Just a quick reminder, we are in conversation with Tony Nadaraja, the former CEO of Hidramani Woven Cluster, Viran Pereira, Managing Director, Kurogaha Lodge, and former Associate Vice President and Country Manager of Mast Industries. And we just heard Dinesh Vikramanayaka, the Managing Director of WNS Sri Lanka. So coming back to the point of loyalty, and I take your point that our leaders or managers may not necessarily be ready to understand that, which then puts the onus on the leaders or the owners of the organization or those at the helm to ensure that there is a constant training, a constant guidance, a constant monitoring to develop that kind of behavior in order to drive this thought. Based on what we've discussed today, and I suppose we can hypothesize that at this point, loyalty is subjective and that it should be applied in instances with reasoning and ethics. And we've seen the importance of that, because you cannot have one without the other. And as Tony mentioned earlier on, that the loyalty is to the organization, which means if everyone is on that same line of thinking, it makes sense. Now, there are instances like family or spouse where that ultimate loyalty is expected, but even then there are always exceptions to the rule. So coming back to the crux of our topic, has corporate culture or the nature of employment, the uncertainty of job security, has that altered the perception of loyalty, in your opinion, from what you've seen, not necessarily within your own organizations, but in general? And can loyalty, as many believe in today's context, be replaced by a work reward culture? Because if I remember, Viran also mentioned earlier on that in some instances, loyalty can be bought, could be temporary, but it can be bought. So can the uncertainty of a job security alter the perception of loyalty? Has it done that? And can loyalty be replaced by a work reward culture?
Let me, Anton, sure. I've actually thought this through recently, right? Because as organizations go through this COVID and with all of the financial difficulties, rate increments, promotions, etc., will be delayed. And I think it's difficult for us to expect that people will be retained in that environment, because people will have their own issues to deal with. So as I said earlier, for me, it's a two-way street. I think it's about identifying what the individual needs are, identifying those risks with those individuals, and ensuring that you put something in place to retain the individual, right? So the loyalty aspect of it, has it gone out? I don't think so. I don't necessarily believe it has. But it takes a lot of work for us to work with people to appreciate the challenges that an individual has, particularly when it comes to remuneration and financial viability of the individual. So, I think your hands are tied. This is a great time for us as leaders to ensure that all of what we've worked on comes to fruition. I think over the last 6-8 months we've had really good attrition. Going forward, we believe that there will be some spikes in attrition because of the fact that things will be getting tougher and people will be looking elsewhere. But that's not because they're disloyal to us. It's because of, as I said, that alignment of individual needs drives values with that of the company's objectives not being congruent, right? So when it's incongruent like that, there are times where people will leave. But I'm also very pleased to say that a lot of people who leave WNS generally rejoin us within 12 months, 24 months, or 3 years, right? So, and that to me is a fantastic test and testament of what I just said. Anton, I think you were on mute.
You're on mute. Yeah, now you're mute.
There we go. Viran, any thought on that?
So yeah, I think post-COVID, it's extremely tough for organizations and leaders, because yes, loyalty is great. You need to build that in within your team and try and build that culture. However, when things are tough economically, when you're struggling as an organization to survive, you need to take certain measures. You need to do something different in order to keep your business, sustain your business. So given that scenario, I would flip the coin, and look at it from the point of view of the workforce, the employee. So looking at it from that perspective, you think, look, this is the organization that sustained us for a period of time, and it's tough for everybody. It's tough for the organization. What do I now need to do to ensure that this organization survives and thereby ensure my own survival in the long term? So I think organizations and people, I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's leadership or whether it's an individual who's working in that organization, we are dealing with people. And post-COVID, people need to start thinking differently wherever you are in the organization ladder, wherever you are in the hierarchy. You need to think very differently from what you did some time ago, pre-COVID. So are there things that we need to do today that was very different to what we did yesterday that would enable the organization to survive and therefore for us to survive? And there's tons of things that you can do when you think of it that way.
Thank you. And that was going to be my next question as well. And interesting, we have another question that's coming from someone in the audience. Can we expect every employee to be loyal to the company or his boss or his boss's boss? But how loyalty and attitudes of employees link together, as I've seen certain employees naturally loyal.
Again, Anton, again,
sorry, there's a technical issue. Sorry about that. So on the question that came in from someone in the audience, and I will put this together, and thank you, Viran, for that input. The question, I guess, is, now we've looked at the different perspectives. What can employees do and what can an employer do to emulate loyalty? Because based on the question that just came in from the audience member, is some members are more loyal than others. Some are loyal to particular boss and some are loyal to the organization. And we also understood that there is a gap that needs to be bridged. Dinesh brought about the importance of training and ensuring that those who are not ready to understand needs to be taught how to look at it, how to deal with it. But very quickly, I know we're mindful of the time, we're almost near the end of our session. Can I ask a minute of your time each to sort of let us know what can an employee do and what can an employer do to emulate loyalty?
Well, I think, first of all, if an employer can build the culture where an employee always does what he thinks is right and damns the consequences because he knows that his organization is looking after his back, as long as he's doing what he actually thinks is the best.
Sure.
If we can create that kind of culture, there are some celebrated cases out there in the world where people, non-stop stores, which is like me, glorified tailors, who were a Fortune 500 company, whose total work instruction manual consisted of one sheet of paper. Use your own best judgment at all times. That was the total non-stop stores. But we have catalogs of work, SOPs, and that's all non-stop gave their people. And they were out of the field to work. They became a Fortune 500 company. So, I mean, You can build cultures and cultures. But then you have to walk that talk and be loyal to an employee. People will get you there. That's my feeling.
Thank you, sir. Dinesh, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I just want to sort of wrap it up. So I think for me, again, it's always a two-way street. I think there are 3 or 4 things that we need to do, and this is collectively needs to be done. Alignment of individuals' career growth with that of the company's goals. And I think to do that, you need to have openness and trust between the individuals. Building and focusing on relationships with your employees at all levels is extremely important factor that needs to be done. Creating job, not security, but a variety of job, the autonomy that you can provide them to be the best that they can. One phrase that I always use is, I want to create an environment for you to be the best you can be, so that we in turn can be the best for our clients. And lastly, it's about alignment of both the employees' values and that of the company's objectives. You're bringing it together, and in this whole scenario, it's not just the company and the managers doing stuff, but it's also about the individual employees being honest, being upfront, and having those dialogues in a trusting environment that will create a good, long-lasting outcome in creating loyalty and better outcomes for organizations all around.
Right, Viran.
So yeah, I this may sound a little corny, but the way I would put it is just go back. So you said, from the point of view of the employer and from the point of view of the employee, what do you do? I would just simply say, treat others the way you would like to be treated. If you're an employer, think of how you would want to be treated if you were an employee. And if you are an employee, think of how you would want to be treated if you're an employer. When you look at it like that, there are so many different things that each individual can do in order to in order to ensure success of the individual as well as the organization. And it's not purely down to financials. It's growth in terms of knowledge, growth in terms of exposure, and growth in terms of personally learning something which will maybe not give you something today, but perhaps in the long term it will help you. I mean, there is this famous speech, a commencement address that the CEO of Apple gave. I think probably everybody would have seen it. He's done certain things in his life which later on yielded massive results. So I would say just flip it completely and look at it from the other person's perspective and do what's right for them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I am mindful, and gentlemen, sadly, with all good things, this must come to an end, and what seems like a blink of an eye, an hour has passed us. So thank you everyone who joined in and stayed locked on. Thank you, Tony, thank you, Viran, and thank you, Dinesh, for weighing in. It was a wonderful conversation. And if there's anything to take away, I guess, if loyalty is and has always been perceived as obsolete, why do we continue to praise it? And as we heard today, because loyalty is essential to the most basic of things that makes life livable, whether it's personal or whether it's corporate. Because as we understood, without loyalty, there can be no love. Without loyalty, there can be no family. Without loyalty, there can be no friendship. And without loyalty, there can be no commitment to the community or country. And without those things, I guess we won't have a society. So respect is earned, honesty is appreciated, trust is gained, but loyalty is returned. Leaving you with those thoughts, a quick thank you to our guest once again. Thank you to H1 for being our technology partner for the 3rd season running. And you've listened in to Revive and Thrive, Season 3 of Reset and Go with Luminary Learning Solutions. Coming up in the next hour is This, That and the Other, Season 2 with Varun. And later this afternoon, they will be discussing the topic longevity. Is it genetics or is it choice? Enjoy the rest of the day. Stay safe. Stay productive.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.